Hi, this is Donna. Welcome to DD Paper Crafts. In today's video, I'm making a project which was inspired by a YouTube video I saw on LPP Crafts, which was a vintage case box. Unfortunately, it was an SVG project, but I wanted to replicate it and make something for myself, and I've come up with my own interpretation. So this is a box. The lid flips back like so. The front folds down, and then inside we have a pull out concertina section. And whereas the video for LPP Crafts, they'd used photos, I'm going to use it to store my seeds. So I've got 15 packets of seeds in here so far, but I do know that I can fit up to 30 packets in here. I appreciate not everyone is going to want to create a 12 divider system as I have, so I will go through some alternatives to using a divider in the video to create the supports for the concertina sections at the side. Without further ado, let's put the project together. We're going to start off by making the outer box, and this will consist of two pieces. The first piece is 9 3/4 inches by 8 1/4 inches, and along the long side score at 2 3/4 and 7 inches. Rotate, and on the short side score at 5 1/2. Then within this section here we're going to score at 6 1/2 down to the first score line. So we're just going to create some tabs, and then we'll rotate 180 degrees so that tab we've just scored is down in this bottom left hand corner, and we're going to score at 2 1/4 down to the first score line. So your piece is going to look like this. And for the front section of the box, your piece will be 5 1/4 times 6. Along the 6-inch side, score at 1/2 inch. And on the short side, score at 1/2 inch and 4 3/4. Bring in the largest piece, and we're going to fold and burnish along all of the score lines. If you have the larger section at the top, so the smaller sections in front of you, we're going to cut up both of these horizontals up to the vertical, like so, and then we're going to cut along the additional score line within the two outer sections, like so, and then take a wedge. So we're just creating our glue tab. Put that piece to one side and bring in the smaller piece, fold and burnish. So this is going to be our drop down front element of our box. If you have your piece in a portrait orientation, we're going to remove the bottom left and right hand corners, like so. And then we're going to take a wedge from the bottom 1/2 inch section. So if we bring in our largest piece, what we're going to do is add glue to these glue tabs here, and they are going to sit like so. So that is going to form the back and the sides of the box. And then this second piece is going to sit on the front, and that is going to be our pull down section, like so. So the whole thing is going to sit like so, and these two tabs are just going to sit inside the box just to create a neater look on the front. If you would prefer, you can cut these side tabs away, you don't need to have them in place. I think I'm going to stick this into place first and then pull up the sides. So I'll use some construction glue because this is quite a thick cardstock, and let's sit this in place. Get it lined up with the front and with the sides. So now I will add glue onto these tabs, and they're going to come like so. So let's add glue onto these 2 glue tabs. Bring these up and just sit those inside. That's that one, and then that is going to come up and just will slot in the front like so. So now what we're going to do is work on the lid, and for this you'll need a piece which is 7 1/4 times 4 3/4. Along the 7 1/4 inch side, score at 1 1/2, rotate 180 degrees and score at 1 1/2, and on the short side score at 1/2 inch and 3 1/4 inches. Then at 3 3/4 inches, score down to the first score line like so, rotate 180 degrees and do the same at 1 inch. Fold and burnish. So the first thing we're going to do is shape our sides. You might want to go in with a pencil and ruler first, that's entirely up to you. And I'm going to cut from the end of this score line, so the second horizontal, across the top of that rectangular section up to the point where the score lines intersect, like so. Rotate and cut up the first horizontal to remove that excess. So this is our shape of our sides. I'm going to flip it over and do the same on the other side. So I'm just going to cut diagonally across to create the shaped side. Rotate, cut up the score line to remove that section, like so. So that's our shaped side. We can take a wedge from this glue tab. This is the hinge which is going to add the lid into the back of the box, like so. Rotate it round. We're going to cut up like so. So this corner is now loose, and then we're going to cut up the additional score line. So this is creating our tab to add our lid together. So let's do the same in this corner, like so. Cut up the additional score line, like so, and then cut a wedge. So before we glue anything in, just flick the hinge back and burnish it in the opposite direction so that we know that it's going to flow freely. I'm going to lay this down and stick the hinge on the inside. So I'm going to sit that in. I've got my back of my box butted up against the score line. I'm just going to gently start to push that into place. Just make sure that is sitting lined up, which it is, and burnish that down. So this is going to come across the front like so. These 2 sides are going to come in, and then this is going to stick onto those glue tabs, and that is our lid, which is going to keep the front of the box in place. I'm going to add the glue, get the lid into shape, and then close it over the top of the box just to make sure that everything is fitting in place. Now let's bring that up and bring the lid down over the top, and you should have a nice snug fit. So that's the lid of the box, and we're now going to make all the internal components. We're now going to create the internal section, the pull-out section, and I am making mine so that it will have 12 sections, 1 for each month of the year, and then my seeds are going to slot behind. If you want to make your concertina different sizes, or if you want more or less places for your items to sit, you will need to change up the measurements for the following pieces. So I would suggest you just watch this next portion through, and then you can see how you will need to change yours up if you're going to do something different. For the base concertina section, you'll need 2 pieces, One will be 11 times 3 3/4, and one will be 10.5 times 3 3/4. And along the long side, you're going to score on both pieces at every 3/4 of an inch. So it would be 3/4, 1.5, 2 1/4, 3, 3 3/4, 4.5, 5 1/4, 6, 6 3/4, 7.5, 8 1/4, 9, 9 3/4, and 10.5. And on the 11-inch piece, that will leave you a 1/2 inch glue tab to join the two pieces together. So repeat that scoring on the 10.5-inch piece. So we'll put that to one side. Whilst I've got the scoreboard out, we'll do the other pieces. For the next element, which is the side supports, you'll need a total of 6 strips which are 11 inches long and 2 strips which are 4.5 inches long, and these are all going to be 1/2 inch wide. Now I've cut mine as 6 strips, but what I would recommend you do, because we're going to score these at every 1/2 inch, cut yourself a piece of cardstock which is 11 by 3 inches, score that at every 1/2 inch along the long side, and then cut that into 1/2 inch strips. That is a much more time efficient way of creating the 6 strips that you need, which are 11 inches long, and then you can cut yourself a piece which is 1 inch by 4.5 inches, score that at every 1/2 inch along the long side, and then cut that in half as well. That's more time efficient than the way that I've actually created these. So you can see for this one here, this is scored along the long side at every 1/2 inch. We will then need some support for the side sections to adhere to. I've chosen to create 12 index cards / dividers, which I'm going to use one for each month. And this is going to support my side supports, which you'll see in the next element. So again, you might not want to use dividers. You might want to just have 2 single posts, which you'll then add on to the base strips to create the same sort of effect. So apologies, but again, because everyone's going to be creating or using these for different reasons, if you keep on watching, I'll cover that in the next section. We now have our 3 elements ready, and we want to, on both the 3 3/4 inch strips and on the 1/2 inch strips, concertina fold along the score lines. So I'm just going to work my way along. Try and make sure that you fold them as evenly as possible. So this first piece is going to sit, and the front of the concertina is going to be with the raw edge at the bottom and the fold at the top. So that's going to sit in that orientation. That is then going to adhere onto the next piece. So we want to fold this in the same orientation, because then that is going to glue over the top like so to continue the concertina. So I'm going to add my glue to this 1/2 inch section, sit this over the top and adhere that into place. I'll just flip this over. Sure everything still stays in line. I'm just going to clip that together whilst that's drying, like so. So we'll put that to one side, and then we've got our 8 strips. So we want to split these into 3 long and 1 short. So that'll be for the left hand side, and this will be for the right hand side. And again, we want to concertina fold these together like so. So that's our small strips concertinaed. So we're going to start our construction. I'm going to start by adding an index card to the front of each of the mountains. So the first one we'll ignore the first mountain, and it's going to sit on the front of the second mountain, like so. I'm going to add each index card to the front of a mountain. Now, as I said, you might not be having dividers, but what you will need is you will need something which these strips can adhere to. So you could, for instance, cut yourself 2 half-inch strips which were 2 inches high and adhere them. You would want them to be taller than the height of your section here and this piece of cardstock, so they would need to be higher than 3/4 of an inch plus half an inch if you were using the same measurements. So let's say, for instance, you cut yours to 2 inches high, and you could stick one of those at the front either side, and they could then adhere onto those. Keep watching and it will make sense. So my first card is going to be stuck on this second section here, and my cards are the same width. So I'm going to add glue all the way along. So that's going to sit on there. Just squeeze that together. Make sure it stays lined up with the edge. And that one's going to sit in place like so. I'm just going to furnish that down. So the next index card is going to sit on this one here. And I'm going to do that all the way along. So if I lay my index card on the top, I can make sure it's lined up with the one in front. So I'm going to get a nice look and then fold that over and secure that into place. So my cards are now in place. Just make sure your piece pulls out, make sure nothing's sticking where it shouldn't be sticking. So I've got an extra mountain at the front, and then I've got my section behind December, which is where my seed packets are going to go. And then I've got this section on the end here, which is where we're going to add it into the back of the piece. So if you imagine, this is going to be adhered to the back of the box, and that is going to pull out like so. So the next element we want to do is add in the side concertinas, which is going to keep the packets in place in the sides. And we've made them concertina shape so that they can stretch out as this stretches out. We're going to work on one of these sections at a time and then join them together as we go along. But we're going to be doing the left and the right at the same time. So take one of the longest sections, and if you watch this, you need to decide how you want to manage this to make it as easy as possible. So I'm going to just clip these all together. So the first concertina section, one of the 11-inch sections, we're going to have it in this orientation so that the mountain is pointing inwards on both sides, so they will come together like so, and we're going to adhere that to the back of this first index card. Now we want to try and make sure that they're aligned, so I'm just going to use the lines on my mat to start with and just mark with a pencil. You can put these anywhere along this side section, so decide a height that looks right for you. So if I do this, so the top of my ½ inch is going to be 2 inches from the top. This pencil mark is going to be the top of this concertina. So add glue onto this one. My mountain is pointing in, and I'm just going to line it up with the pencil mark on the side, like so. Flip that out the way, and then I'm going to do the same with this one. Add some glue onto this square, and then add this one into place. Sit that squarely on like so. Okay, so they are added to the first index card. So now we want to push in one mountain either side. The tops of these I'm going to refer to as mountains. Push in one mountain, push in another mountain like so, and then bring down the next card or support or whatever it is that you're going to be using. So that is going to collapse inside and come and sit on top of the concertina like so. Let's clip this back together, and eventually you'll get into a rhythm. So I'll just go over that again. So I've got my first element is now glued down, fold in one mountain, fold in two mountains, one mountain, two mountains, fold down your next support or your card, make sure it's concertinaed at the bottom. I'll lift this up to show you. So that is all lined up in that section there. And then we're going to add glue to this section. Glue to this section. And then we're going to fold those over and secure those to the back of the index card or the support, like so. So if we lift that up, we've got two mountains in the middle, 1, 2, or we've got two mountains on the outside. So we're going to carry on in that vein all the way along. So one mountain in either side, two mountains in either side. Bring down the next index card, concertina that at the back, sit that on the top, add glue to the next section, and adhere that to the back of the index card or the support. And now we want to add in our next strip. So I'm going to take another of the longer strips, add glue to the end, and that is going to secure onto there to continue the concertina. And then we will carry on in the same vein through all of the supports or index cards. The piece is now added together, and you can see how far that concertina's out. You can either finish the decoration of this now and then add it into the box, or add it into the box and then add your element onto the front to pull. I'm going to add mine into the box now. If you do want to decorate the inside of the box, you need to do that now before we add this into place. I'm going to stand my box up and add my glue to the last two concertinas on the side and the base section. Stretch this out, and I want this back section here up against the back and against the base. I think the easiest way is if I sit the box like this, and then I can grab this bottom piece and sit that in place. So I want it lined up, and get my score tool in and get that lined up at the back. And then I'm going to use my tweezers and push that round and into place. Do the same with this side. So that is a bit fiddly, but I can just get in there with my finger or my tweezers to push that back section into place. And then if that all pushes in, I can then push that up against the back. and you can see how that is sitting in place. So this back bit is a bit fiddly, granted. So you can see how that now fits in the back of the box. As the box opens, this will naturally spring out, but if we push it all back in, fold the front up, put the lid down, and everything is neatly on the inside. So I'm going to carry on with my decorations, put my seeds in so you can see how it all works, and then we can go through any additional pieces that I've added. Here's my finished decorated box. I've added pattern paper onto all of the sides and a simple topper on the front. I will give you the measurements for the pattern paper. So for the lid, you'll have one piece which is 4 inches by 2.5 inches. A piece for the front here, which is 4 inches by 1.25. And then I have 2 side sections, which were 2.25 by 1.25, and I've then just cut them across diagonally to get this shape. We have 2 side sections, which are 5.25 by 2.5, and then 2 pieces for the front and back, which are 5.25 by 4. To the front pull element, I've attached 3 die cut seed packets which I had, and I've just attached those to the front of the mountain, so you can use those to pull the concertina out. And then I've added a simple month label to the front of each of the dividers. So with the exception of all the folding and burnishing, etc., I have enjoyed putting this project together, and I am quite happy with how this has turned out. So there we have today's project. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, thanks for watching.